the research around mitochondrial health and its ties to almost every disease of aging is very clear. And so now the more that people are talking about mitochondrial health, there's going to be more awareness, and there's so many things that you can do to target mitochondrial health. And Urolithin A is one of those things. So it works. So let me just explain briefly like what the mitochondria are. I know your listeners are probably pretty educated in this world, but the mitochondria, we often think of them as the powerhouse of the cell, right? That's how most of us learned it in high school biology. And I think that's a little bit of a disservice because the mitochondria actually do lots of things for our body outside of just creating energy.
Welcome to another episode of the Hack My Age podcast. I want to thank you for leaving a review. You know exactly who you are on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you haven't done that yet, please head on over and give a review, a star rating, and we would absolutely love you for that. It's a small gesture that makes a huge impact for us to grow the podcast and for other women to find us. In this episode, we are talking about Urolithin A. I know this is probably the first time you've heard of it, but we'll explain what it is and how it can help with recovery, muscle health, and inflammation. And keep in mind, this episode was recorded just before my hip surgery. So we're going to discuss how I'm going to use Urolithin A and a product called MitoPure to help me with the recovery. So follow me on Instagram and Facebook and sign up to the newsletter to go and see how I'm doing. It's probably about a month later. So that's my real-time experience. In the episode, we cover the power of Urolithin A on mitochondrial function and how it affects women in menopause. We talk about what in the world is mitochondria, giving a little refresher course on that and how it's important for things other than energy. And then we talk about how the loss of estrogen is affecting our mitochondrial health and then our overall health, and what steps we can take to improve the mitochondrial function, size, and number. And then we discuss how Urolithin A compares to my favorite compounds, the creatine and essential amino acids, and how they compare for muscle health. And by the way, I am taking all three of them for my recovery. And then we talk about how to dosage. We talked about Urolithin A and it's the effect that it has on the skin cells. I'm also sharing those real-time results with the Timeline Serum on my social media. So you can find me at Hack My Age on Instagram and Facebook. Now, we talk a lot about a supplement called MitoPure, and this is the best source of Urolithin A. Yeah, it's better than food in this context. And a skin serum called the Serum. This is all by a company called Timeline, who our guest is connected with. So you may want to give it a go. And Timeline is offering our listeners 10% off their first order if you go to timeline.com/Zora. And the link is in the show notes. So let me tell you a little bit about Jennifer before we jump in. She's a registered dietitian nutritionist with over 2 decades of expertise in nutrition and wellness. She's got a master's degree in integrative and functional nutrition, coupled with advanced training in bioenergetics. And this gives her a really, really strong understanding of this complex interplay between nutrition and cellular health and longevity. And she's currently the senior manager of Timeline Nutrition, where she plays a really important role in educating both the healthcare professionals and the consumers about the significance and importance of cellular health and Urolithin A in the context of aging and longevity. And she's also a pretty well-known speaker and writer, so it's great to have her on with us. And she continues to practice as a nutritionist, helping her clients optimize their nutrition for more vitality and a longer health span. So now let's get started with the show. So it's a pleasure to welcome Jennifer Scheinman. Welcome.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to join you.
Well, I'm really excited to talk about the topic of Urolithin A, because a lot of people don't know about it. But before we do, let us know a little bit about yourself and how you came into the world of nutrition.
Yeah, well, I have been in the world of nutrition for my entire career. So I graduated college all the way back in 97. So it's been quite a long journey. You know, when I entered the world of nutrition and dietetics, really from a very different lens than I look at nutrition these days. So back then, when I had graduated college, I was very concerned with weight, and sort of the message in the dietetics community was very much this whole calories in versus calories out. And not really as focused on sort of the quality of what's in our food and how that can nourish us. And through, quite a journey, I found myself into the world of functional nutrition. And that was, I think a lot of people get into the world of sort of functional medicine due to a chronic condition or some sort of condition that sort of mainstream medicine fails them on. And for me, that was chronic Lyme. And so that was really what changed my path to this whole idea of like root cause medicine and how nutrition can just play such a deep and nourishing role in our health. And so from there, I kind of have been in private practice and I've worked with a number of brands. And now I find myself working for a supplement company called Timeline. And we'll talk a lot about Urolithin A, but it's been a really interesting journey and seeing how the message is changing from this very simplistic role of food into just how nourishing it is for our bodies.
I'm so glad you got into the functional nutrition space because you're right. Things have really changed a lot. Just out of curiosity, your Lyme, how did you recover fully from this through nutrition, or was there something else in case people listening are going, me too,
Yeah.
Lyme?
Yeah. Well, I definitely, I did sort of all the things. I was very lucky to have a very forward-thinking practitioner who specialized in Lyme. So it was through diet, it was through a lot of supplements, a lot of, even outside the realm of my knowledge, Chinese medicine and homeopathic medicine and a whole series of herbs. We did a lot of like muscle testing, which when you first asked me about that like 10 years ago, I thought was complete woo and nonsense. And then also just some energy healing and a lot of mindset work as well. And just some, work with therapy and all the above. But I do feel like, I still don't even know to this day if you can ever claim that you're cured from what I understand, right? The viruses and bacteria can kind of like be hiding out within you. But I feel as good as I possibly think I could for, granted, I'm going to be 49 next week, but I'm a 49-year-old woman in the throes of perimenopause. So I feel as good as one can be expected at that point in her life, but I don't think it has anything to do with my Lyme. So yeah.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good to hear. You've found what works, because when you have something and you're not really sure what it is and you keep searching and searching and searching, and again, it just never seems to be one thing. Oh, it's been pomegranate juice. Okay, that's what cured me. I wish it
No,
were as easy as
yeah.
that.
And to be honest, I think the one thing, if I could point it, was honestly just finding a practitioner who believed me and listened to me. Because as soon as I found someone who said, I'm in this with you, and together we're going to figure this out, that was, I think, like the first step in my recovery. And it gave me hope again after being dismissed by so many, Western medicine who just like nothing was showing up on tests. So that's really, I think, my message to everybody out there is just find someone. And it was a long journey after that. It was still like probably 4 years till I really started feeling myself. But that
Wow.
was when like I just felt hope again.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a long time, 4 years, but it's worth it if you can feel much better. So
Absolutely.
maybe we'll get the number of your doctor in case other people. I
Yeah.
know I'm going to get calls like, "What's the name of a doctor?"
Yeah,
You
she's
send
in
it to me.
Denver, so but
Uh-huh.
I'm happy to pass on the name. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So let's jump into the world of urolithin A. And I've been hearing a lot about it in the last couple of years. For some people, it'll be totally new. It's the first time they've heard of this. Most people don't know what it is. Let's explain what that is and why women in peri and postmenopause need to be aware of it.
So you're absolutely right. For most people, this is going to be a brand new word. So for anyone who's listening and is feeling like they are need to catch up on something, this is new for most people. And I think the reason for that is the research on urolithin A. I mean, it's decades. It's at least 15 years, but there's never really been um, a commercialized product until the last 4 years that really was putting a voice and a message to all this research. So I think that's a big reason why people just haven't heard about it before. But what it is, it's a natural bioactive molecule. We don't get it directly from food. So it's not like a traditional, vitamin or mineral or even antioxidant that we can just eat food and get it. Instead, we have to rely on our gut microbiome to make it. So it's called what's known as a postbiotic. And there are several postbiotics. I mean, I think we hear this a lot that like our gut is like this pharmacy that is creating these molecules, and we don't even know the half of it or the quarter of it of what these, what our gut is doing for us. But B vitamins, vitamin K, they are actually postbiotics. Short chain fatty acids like butyrate, right? Those are becoming very well-known postbiotics. So urolithin A is just like that. Our gut will take these polyphenols that are in foods like pomegranates, berries, and nuts, and it'll convert it into urolithin A. So we've got to rely on our gut in order to make it for us.
And a polyphenol is what gives the color, no, to pomegranate or certain foods, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a polyphenol is a plant compound. You're absolutely right. It's, it can be an antioxidant, it can hold other properties. And there, different foods will have different polyphenols. So the polyphenols in like a blueberry will be different than the polyphenols that are in, say, a pomegranate, which is
Mm.
part of why we want to be eating a rainbow of foods.
So when was urolithin A discovered? Is this,
So
do you have any
to
year, more or
Yeah, so to
less?
be honest, I don't know when it was actually discovered, but I do know that it went really like on people's radar probably about 15 years ago. And it was actually the founders of Timeline. So they're the makers of Urolithin A, and they were really on this mission to kind of deconstruct the pomegranate and understand what about the pomegranate is so nutritious, right? We know that there's all these complex bioactives in the pomegranate that have all these health promoting benefits. And so they were working with a research group that was out of the EPFL, which is in Switzerland. That's like the MIT of Switzerland. And there's this really well-known researcher there called Dr. Johann Avrix. And they gave him they're called oligotannins. That's the specific polyphenol that's in urolithin A. I'm sorry, that's in pomegranates. And so they gave him some of these oligotannins and some other polyphenols, and they gave him urolithin A, which they actually thought was like a waste product. They didn't really think this was anything particularly special. And I don't really know the whole story other than I assume it was just sheer luck that they decided to give him this postbiotic, and he fed it to worms in his labs. And the worms that were fed the urolithin A lived like 45% longer than
Wow.
the other worms. And he was like, what is this? This is
Wow.
something we need to study. And that is really kind of where things started when they kind of realized that this potential waste product actually had some potential benefits.
And then, if I understand the story right, this was 15 years ago, more or less. And then
Yep.
they went on to mice or rodents, and then eventually humans, they started testing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So a lot of longevity research will start in worms, for example, because they only live about 30 days. So it's really easy
Yeah.
to test interventions. And so not only did these worms live longer, but they were more active longer. And then they did a similar type of test on mice who also, they fed it to older mice who got much more active. And then, of course, in order to really know, right, humans are not mice, of course, right? We're much more
Yeah.
complex. So you're absolutely right. There was several clinical trials that were done on humans, identifying its mechanism of action and then what kind of benefits it can have.
This reminds me of the research Dr. Walter Longo did. He was one of my professors at USC for
Mm,
gerontology, and he was talking about caloric restriction and extending lifespan of, well, first it was yeast and then worms and flies and et cetera, et cetera. But he couldn't replicate it in the orangutans, or no, it was orangutan, it was just monkeys and humans. But so it kind of ended there in terms of extending lifespan. However, he said, well, the health span was way greater, was much more improved. Is it what, because I imagine in 15 years, you can't really test how long someone's going to live or how they extended their lifespan, but what are the benefits that they're seeing when they've tested the urolithin A in these studies?
And that's exactly, health span is really, I know there's a lot of talk out there around extending lifespan. And, at this point in time, without using biomarkers, I mean, it's pretty much impossible to study, lifespan, right? Are we going to start feeding something to someone as a child and then, track them for potentially 80, 100 years, right? That's just not
Mhm.
something we're set up to do right now. But yeah, I mean, Dr. Longo's work, I think you're absolutely right in like fasting and fasting mimicking diets that he's got. It's just how do these improve are biomarkers of health and how do they improve health span, which just to kind of like redefine for your listeners, I'm sure you talk about this a lot, but lifespan is just that chronological age. How long do you live from the day that you're born until the day that you pass away? Whereas health span is, I think of it as like the quality of those years, right? Like I personally don't have an interest in living to 120 if the last 20 years are going to be wheelchair bound and with severe like cognitive impairment. I'd rather live to 100 being active and doing as many of the things as I love to do, right? Or if it's 80 to 100 or whatever that age point is that's appealing to people. So that's really what I think the research around Urolithin A is right now, is how can we prolong people's health span, living actively, living through vitality and limiting the amount of disease that they have. And the research really has so far, at least in humans, been in the area of muscle. And there's so much talk, right, about muscle being the organ of longevity. And, we start to lose muscle mass in our 30s, right? So this is something I think that can be really powerful in helping to extend somebody's lifespan. I'm sorry, health span.
Yeah, exactly. So the research, let's talk about what the research is showing and then the mechanism of action, like how this is even possible, because I bet the research that they're showing, okay, the worms are living almost 50% longer. So why? But he also mentioned they're more vigorous, so they got more energy, they're behaving differently.
Yeah.
So what is the research showing? Why is this happening and how?
So it all comes down actually to the mitochondria, right? And so mitochondria, I really believe, and I feel like I've been on repeat saying this a lot, but I'm going to keep saying it until, because I know your audience hasn't heard it yet. I really think of mitochondrial health as like the next level of wellness and health, and almost like the next gut health, right? Like 10, 15, even 20 years ago, the idea that we had bacteria in our gut and this was healthy was so novel and weird to people. And now it's like household terminology, right? Everybody, is taking probiotics, and our sodas have prebiotics, right? It's made you know, such a complete turnaround where this is just everyday conversation. And I really think that's where mitochondrial health is going, because the research around mitochondrial health and its ties to almost every disease of aging is very clear. And so now the more that people are talking about mitochondrial health, there's going to be more awareness, and there's so many things that you can do to target mitochondrial health. And Urolithin A is one of those things. So it works. So let me just explain briefly like what the mitochondria are. I know your listeners are probably pretty educated in this world, but the mitochondria, we often think of them as the powerhouse of the cell, right? That's how most of us learned it in high school biology. And I think that's a little bit of a disservice, because the mitochondria actually do lots of things for our body outside of just creating energy. So they play a role in calcium homeostasis. They play a role in cell signaling. So when our cells are supposed to retire and die, they play a role in that. Even some of our steroid synthesis and amino acid synthesis, they do so many things for our body besides just energy. And I think of them almost as like a factory, right? Like they take the raw materials, which is the food that we eat and the air that we breathe, and it goes through this very complex assembly line, and it creates energy for our cells to do their job. But like any other factory, it does start to wear down with time and wear and tear. And so our bodies, being as miraculous as they are, we have this innate quality control mechanism to recycle our mitochondria. So when they start to become dysfunctional and start to break down, we can clean house, we can get rid of the cellular waste and build new mitochondria. And that process is something called mitophagy. And that's exactly where urolithin A works. It helps to recycle your dysfunctional mitochondria.
So well put. That's exactly what the information I gave in a program that I made called the Energy Reboot. This is for women going through menopause, and we just ground down all of the mitochondria, and you said it so well. I'm having a little record scratch here. I'm going to just totally distract everybody for a second, and then we'll go back to the mitochondria and mitophagy. What did you say about prebiotics in soda?
Oh, like Olipop, and like there's these like healthy soda alternatives. So there's a brand called Olipop, and I'm forgetting what the other brand is, but yeah, they have like they're trying to basically like market themselves as like a functional beverage. And so they have fibers and prebiotics in there, and they tend to have like only like 5 grams of sugar. I think they usually use like a stevia or some sort of alternate sweetener.
So,
But yeah, it's a gut health drink, basically.
well, as a nutritionist, is this a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
Call it a thumbs middle, a healthier option than soda. I think for somebody who's really struggling to get fiber in, this could potentially be a way to help. It wouldn't be, I drink them once in a while as like a little treat when I just really want
Mhm.
something sweet to drink. And by once in a while, this might be like once every 3 months. So I don't think it needs to be like a demonized food, but I don't know that I'd call it like a health food that we should be relying on as like our, main source of fiber. It's usually
Okay.
like inulin and chicory. And so for some
Ah,
people, that can also be really distressing to their gut.
yeah.
But yeah, I think, like I said, like if I don't drink soda, but like, the rare times when I kind of just want like a sweet,
Yeah.
carbonated drink, it does the job.
Okay, because in Europe that hasn't hit Europe yet. So
You
I'm
haven't gotten
like,
that in Europe yet. Well,
what?
your US listeners will know Olipop, and I don't know why I'm totally having a brain fog on the other brand,
That's
but
okay.
yeah.
We don't need it. That's interesting. Okay. Let's get back to the mitochondria. So just for people to understand the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cells, but it does so much more than that. And Urolithin A is the one that helps reboot and recharge. It causes or activates the mitophagy function, that repair and recycling process. Did I get that correct?
Perfectly. You got it.
Okay, because my listeners know what autophagy is, and that's the cellular cleanup of the cells. But this is mitophagy, so it's almost when an autophagy happens, does mitophagy not actually happen at the same time?
It's probably happening at similar times. I think also mitophagy might be happening outside of like autophagy. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, the like very detailed mechanisms of that. But the mito so it is basically autophagy just at a very targeted cellular level happening just on the mitochondria. Right. So the
Hmm.
mitochondria can become damaged outside of other cellular components. And so you don't necessarily need to clean the entire, right? If your
Hmm.
dishwasher is broken, you don't need to demolish the whole kitchen, right? And so that's how I would think about it. And mitophagy is happening just like autophagy, right? These things are happening in the background all the time. So exercise is going to help upregulate that process. Fasting and calorie restriction is going to help upregulate that process. But as we get older, that cleanup process also declines, right? So you start
Hmm.
to get more damaged mitochondria, less ability to clean house. And so that's why, as we get older, exercise, if you aren't doing it already, like you need to be doing it, watching your diet, and then looking for other things that can kind of help to support what's happening on a biological level. And urolithin A is the only external, like outside of like fasting and exercise, right? It's the only molecule that has been proven in humans in clinical trials to stimulate autophagy.
Not everybody can fast or should fast, first of all. Not everyone wants to fast, and some people can't exercise like me right now before my hip surgery. So
Exactly.
it's not only lazy people, it's nice to know that we have options when we can't do these things. Now, let's talk about the woman going through perimenopause and menopause, because as I understand, mitochondria, they rely on estrogen to function optimally, right? So if we don't have that, then they can change in size and density and all this as we go through to menopause. Do you have any interesting research on how urolithin A affects a woman in this menopause transition versus maybe men of the same age?
So we don't have research per se in the sense of like, looking at like how its impact is on estrogen. And, I think a lot of the impact of estrogen on the mitochondria, a lot of it's still unfortunately in animal models. But we do know, right? Like I just learned very recently, I'm going through perimenopause. So I've also been really diving into this research. And it was like a wow moment when I was like, the mitochondria have estrogen receptors. Like,
Yep.
whoa, right?
That's cool.
So we know that there must be some impact on there. But what the research that we do have, at least with urolithin A, is sort of our, so we have proven through muscle biopsies in both men and women that urolithin A will stimulate mitophagy. And so the next question became, well, so what? And so we did two clinical trials there in middle-aged adults. So these were mostly women actually in a study who were ages 45 to, I believe it was 60 or 65. And then we did another study that I think was 70% women, and they were ages 65 to 90. So we sort of had
Mm.
that perimenopausal age, and then we had postmenopausal. And in both of those groups, we saw improvements in muscle endurance, in muscle strength. We saw benefits to VO2 max, to 6-minute walk test, C-reactive protein and inflammatory markers. So we saw several improvements there. Again, back to that health span, right? Muscle is so important. And we know as women go through menopause, our muscles are so impacted. So even though it wasn't directly saying like, this is a group of perimenopausal women, let's study estrogen, let's study all of these types of things. It was just straight up like, let's look at muscle health in this group of population. And we saw a benefit there.
I love that. That's the one thing that attracted me like right away when I started reading about Urolithin A and MitoPure. I was like, oh my God, because I'm all about muscle, and I'm in as gerontologists, we know we study this so much, that sarcopenia and frailty and falls and all this stuff, and the importance of having muscle mass. You know, I'm so happy everybody else is now finally saying the same mantra. But so I read this study as well. It's actually really cool on your website, or on the Timeline website. It says it logs all these studies that have been done, and not only on just Urolithin A period, but also on the product MitoPure. And it shows that to reduce the inflammation, and it shows about the help with the muscle mass. So my listeners know by now that I'm going to get a hip surgery. And this episode is now about a month probably after post surgery, and I'm just starting MitoPure. So I'm kind of wondering, how should I be doing this? Should you think I should be double dosing, or skip it pre and post surgery? Or like, how are people using MitoPure for either the inflammation or the muscle mass?
Yeah. Well, so one thing I just want to correct. So we didn't study actually an increase in muscle mass per
Oh,
se. What
okay.
we
Thanks
found
for.
was, yeah, what we found was through markers of, we would look at, for example, muscle endurance would be contractions until you fatigue, or muscle strength, like your peak torque of a hamstring muscle. I suspect because our longest study went 4 months, and we didn't change diet, we didn't change exercise. So it's not really surprising that muscle mass didn't go up. But there are really other important qualities of just muscle, or muscle quality, right? Like muscle cell quality is also important. And we know that that's also impacted through perimenopause. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that. And I suspect, although we haven't studied this, that if your muscles are stronger, like each individual cell is stronger, and you are doing things like getting enough protein and strength and resistance training, you are going to see hypertrophy. You're going to see muscle mass start to grow. We just didn't study that. So I just
Mm,
wanted to kind of clarify
yeah.
that one point.
But
And
I
then,
suspect you're right. I mean, I
yeah,
mean, come on. This is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be measuring my muscle mass. I mean, that's what I can. The strength, I mean, well, I will clearly get stronger, because post-operation, it only gets better than that from there, I'm guessing. So, and that's a really important point too. So, okay, the muscle mass, and I can say right now, my muscle mass is there. Like, I've
mhm,
actually have been able to maintain it through Katsu training. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's
no,
incredible. But I don't think the strength's there. The strength going up the flight of stairs is really hard for me. So you're kind of going, okay, so this is really important for women to understand. Strength and endurance, power, and hypertrophy are all very different. I want it all personally. But yeah, we can differentiate those things. I'm really glad you pointed that out. So,
yeah. And they all
okay,
play a
continue.
role in each other. So I think when you start to work on one, you're going to start to work on the other. So, in your case, right? So the two studies that I talked about, we didn't change exercise, we didn't change diet. And in fact, they were really like a sedentary group of individuals that we were studying. So people who weren't exercising are noticing these benefits in their muscle health. So I think, for somebody who's going through surgery and is going to, is either already injured and can't be as active as they would like to be, or is going to be on some sort of bed rest and, limited mobility after a surgery, I think this is something that could be really, really helpful in slowing down the decline of what's happening to our muscles. And, an anecdotal story, I gave it to my mom probably about 2 years ago. She was going through back surgery. She's, was in her like early 70s at that point. And so obviously I was very concerned. She's a very active 70-year-old, but was concerned about the muscle wasting that was going to happen after not being able to exercise for 6 weeks. And so I gave her 1,000 milligrams of MitoPure. And, as she was taking it, like in her recovery, at first she was like, I don't know if this is doing anything. And then she works out with a trainer. And so she went back to her trainer and she could not believe how good she felt at her first session back. Like she felt like she really, she did, of course, take it easy when she went back for her first session, but she was like, I felt great. I felt strong. I didn't feel like I was starting over again. She wasn't sore the next day. And so that was really her buy-in. She, fast forward like 2 years, has had an ankle surgery, and her doctors wanted her off of it like right before surgery and for like a little bit after, just, because doctors always like to play it safe. And she also really noticed like the days that she was off it leading up to her surgery. And then, after, of course, she had anesthesia and all that, but she was just like, I've noticed my energy is just plummeted. And that was, like I said, even before the surgery. So we couldn't blame that quite on the anesthesia. And it's a
Interesting.
study that we're actually doing right now. And I believe it's wrapping up. So this is he's a really big protein researcher, Stu Phillips out of McMaster's University. And so he's looking at people who are going through a voluntary like immobilization, and they are, given either a high protein diet or high protein with urolithin A to see if when you're mobilized, like you might be in an injury or surgery, what's going to be the impact on muscle. So we don't have any details on that yet. So that's something we'll have to listen to. But the way the science is, and that I understand the physiology of what's happening and the biochemistry of what's happening in our cells, I think it makes perfect sense for you to want to start, especially if you're not active right now, to start now. And then, of course, like whatever your doctors recommend to be off during surgery and, the healing process right after. But then as soon as you're able to start again. And I'd probably start. So the doses that MitoPure comes in are 1,000 and 500 milligrams. And we've seen benefits on muscle at 500 milligrams. We start to see more robust improvements at 1,000.
How much is this bottle here?
That bottle is a 60 count. So 2 soft gels is 500 milligrams. So that would be 30 days. Yep.
Okay.
You got it. 30 days of 500 milligram. If you want to go up to 1,000, that's only going to be half. So you'd have to take 4 pills a day.
So I could take 4 like right before my surgery and right after?
Absolutely. Yep. So you can safely go up. There's no reason to go above 1,000. So what we found is that the benefits start to kind of plateau. I guess the system just kind of gets saturated with urolithin A. There's no toxicity. So, I mean, somebody could go higher, but there really is no benefit to doing that. But 500 to 1,000 is the sweet spot for most people. I think starting at 500 is a good place to be. Like I said, I'm like a, 49-year-old, relatively healthy person. I stick with 500 milligrams. I do have my parents on 1,000 milligrams. They're in their 70s. I want to do all the things. When I'm traveling, when I think I'm going to be a little bit more fatigued, or if I'm like injured and need to kind of cut back, I will go up to 1,000 milligrams then too.
Interesting. So just to remind people, this is one part of the puzzle because Jennifer is a nutritionist too. So she's not saying, skip your protein or skip whatever, just take this and don't need to exercise. All these things are really important. These are just, supplements to actually supplement an already good, healthy diet and lifestyle. So there was one interesting thing when I did share this on the Instagram reel, and look how red they're beautifully red. Somebody said, "Oh, I think they're using dye," and I looked at the bottle. I was like, "No, I know I checked, and it's aatto." What is aatto? This is used for coloring.
For coloring. I should know where aatto comes from, and I forget where that does come from. So I can certainly get back to you.
I found it. It's a plant.
So, and we just went through, we did a new formulation of our soft gels because we wanted to make it a vegan friendly. So there used to be a gelatin in our older soft gels. And so we wanted to make it something that anybody who's plant-based could have as well. And so when we did that, we put aatto in it for the coloring because we wanted to keep that nice red coloring. It kind of is like an homage to the pomegranate. And we have clean label certification on our products. And we also are NSF for sport. So there's a lot of, transparency in what we put inside to make sure that it is the cleanest and the most, highest quality ingredients.
Yeah, it is. She scared me for a second. I went to Google. I was like, what is this? Not if it's anything like natto, I'll be really happy. And it was amazing. Yeah, it was a plant that had all these great benefits to it and all that. So yeah, no fear there. Let us go back to, I was interested because what you're saying right now, I know a lot of people are thinking, as I was thinking too, as well as I told my editor, I was like, hey, there's this thing, called Urolithin A and timeline. And he said, where does it come from? I said, well, I didn't understand at the beginning. I was like, I don't know, I think pomegranates so it came from pomegranates, or, you'll explain it. And then he's like, oh, great. Thanks for reminding me. I'll go eat my pomegranate. And I was like, I don't think it's that simple because this is like you said, our bacteria needs to, in our gut needs to be able to process whatever it is it's in the pomegranate, right? And then if you don't, then, and I think it's about 70% of the people don't have this bacteria to make the urolithin A. Let's clear up what I just said because I just make sure people understand.
You basically got it. So the starting point is the pomegranate. Some dark skinned berries and nuts have these polyphenols, right? And remember these plant compounds that make them so colorful. But the urolithin A itself is not directly in the pomegranate. So no shade to a pomegranate. I love them. They are very healthy. But if you're relying on that specifically for urolithin A, chances are it's not going to help you. And here's why. So we have studied populations to find out if people can make urolithin A. And let me start by saying first, we haven't actually pinpointed which species or strain of bacteria is those that make urolithin A. So we know that people who have a healthier, more robust, diverse microbiome tend to be producers. But, so like I couldn't say, well, take, you know, this probiotic with your pomegranate and you're going to get urolithin A. We unfortunately just don't know that yet.
But when you do, you'll have an upgraded formula.
We probably will, yeah. So so we know that really at baseline when we tested, this was a group that we tested out of in Chicago, so at least this is US people, really at baseline, only about 12% of people had any urolithin A in their blood at all. And then we fed them pomegranate juice, which is a great precursor, partly because some of those polyphenols are actually in like the white part of the pot, like the membrane in between
That we
the
take out and we
pomegranate.
don't eat.
Correct. Yeah. So when you have pomegranate juice, a lot of that gets crushed in there. So you get all these rich
Oh.
polyphenols in pomegranate juice. And what we found is even after having pomegranate juice, only like 30 to 40% of the population could even make urolithin A. And
Mm.
those who are making it are making it at all different variable quantities. So even, right, even if we did identify that probiotic, right, is it making enough? And what we found is that you would actually, to get the same 500 milligram benefit in those two little soft gels that you held up, you'd have to drink 6 cups of pomegranate juice a day. And like I
Wow.
said, love pomegranates.
Mm, yeah,
A
too
pomegranate
much.
juice spritzer, okay, right? But to drink 6 cups of pomegranate juice a day, I would not recommend that as a dietitian. Too much sugar, definitely
Yeah.
not what we want to be doing. So this is, to your point that you said earlier, a food first, right? Supplements are meant, they're not miracles. They are just meant to supplement places where diet is a challenge to get enough. And this is one of those rare instances where I do think if you're looking for the benefits of urolithin A, eat the pomegranates, they're delicious, but don't count on them for your urolithin A because chances are you're not making enough, even if you have that right microbes to make it.
So let's then talk a bit about, so just to remind people, the urolithin A is there to help support mitophagy, right? Support your mitochondria so that you can support your health span. You have more numbers of years with healthy life, right? Less
Yeah.
disease. So what else can a woman who's, let's say she's losing her estrogen in midlife, there's her mitochondria just not functioning as well. What else can she do apart from taking Nidapure? That's one thing, because it's the only urolithin A, as I understand, it's the only urolithin A supplement that's out there, right?
Well, there are a few others that are popping up on the market, of course, right? There's always going to be, new, I call them sort of Me Too products. But this goes beyond just MitoPure and Urolithin A is, anytime you want to take a supplement, you need to make sure that it's third party tested, right? And so that means, right, there's a lot of here, at least in the United States, there's, the FDA regulations on supplements, there are post-market. People don't have to prove efficacy. They don't even have to prove quality. What we're finding, like there was a study out recently, like melatonin supplements, like some of them had like 10 times as much melatonin as they're claiming is on the bottle, or like sometimes they don't have anything, right? So that's the first thing is, and MitoPure, as I mentioned, it's NSF for sport and it is clean label certified. And almost all of the studies, at least the clinical studies that were done on Urolithin A, were done specifically with MitoPure. So,
Oh,
so you
great.
then have to question, right? Like, well, is a different form of Urolithin A going to have that same impact that MitoPure is going to have? So, if you're buying something on Amazon, I would, recommend you just reach out to whoever is selling it, to the manufacturer, the realtor, the brand, and just kind of ask them for their studies, their quality, their purity testing, all of that. But that's really why I am sort of gung-ho on MitoPure specifically. And, like I said, with any other supplement outside of MitoPure, right? Like we just need to talk about quality and what's in there.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
people do your research, go check it out. But, we have everything. It's on Mighty Pure. It's all transparent there. And I just love that you have all these studies. Then, so the woman who's going through menopause or perimenopause into this menopause, so she's got to boost her mitochondria. So let's say she's on the MitoPure. What else can she do to increase the function, the size, the number?
I think, the main thing is physical activity and exercise, right? Like that. And I'd probably even put that in front of the MitoPure, right? We just know that estrogen is impacting our muscles. Our muscles play a role in insulin resistance. Our muscles play a role in glucose metabolism. I very rarely say everybody should, but strength training is probably the one thing that I say every woman should do. And if you're somebody who doesn't strength train, that's okay. That doesn't mean going to the gym and throwing around heavy weights. Like your body weight or an exercise band is a perfect place to start. So it doesn't need to be scary. I mean, there's so much wonderful content on YouTube that's things that you can do in the privacy of your own home and learn things. I'm a big proponent of getting, even if it's just once or twice, a personal trainer who can show you how to safely do things, because that's the other thing is we just need to be really careful at this age to be, mindful of injury. But I think, for just general health, general longevity, and then of course, perimenopausal changes, strength training and physical activity in general is probably the number one best thing that you can do.
Hoorah. I would just second that. Ditto everything.
Yeah.
I can't wait. Okay, by the time this podcast ends, it's me. I'm done. I'm ready to
Yeah,
jump in again.
I'm sure. Yeah. And then I'd say, diet. I think this is also very individualized, right? There are a lot of people who are big proponents of plant-based diets for women going through perimenopause. And then on the other end of the spectrum, right, I've heard of people that feel fantastic and wonderful on, even carnivore diets, right? So I think the main thing is quality, first of all, right? Because both a carnivore diet and a plant-based diet, you can do a junk food diet and you can also do a high quality diet, right? And so we really need to be moving away from processed foods that are full of added sugars, inflammatory fats, and fillers and gums and all of those things. I also think I went into nutrition because I love food. And I think there's such a piece for that social aspect of food and the cultural aspect of food. And as women are going through perimenopause, we are losing a lot of joy in our life. And if we take away the joy of food and the joy of eating and the joy of like being with your friends and your family and community, I think that's a big loss. So I think it's very individualized as like what's really the perfect diet for women going through perimenopause. But what I can say is that fiber, polyphenol, so all these like wonderful, different colored plants, and so and getting adequate protein, like those have to be staples in the diet. And then, as I said, moving to as much a whole food, you know, style diet. And that's really, I think, again, we're like working with a nutritionist or a health coach or a dietitian can help you, if something else is going on where you actually really might benefit from a keto diet or a carnivore diet for you individually, you can kind of work on that with some guidance. But I think it becomes really challenging for me to make a blanket statement like all women should do this. But protein, veggies, fiber would probably be my three things to on the make sure they're in your diet list.
I'm on it. That's also helped me with my muscle mass. I swear to God. And just to remind the women, just in case, having less joy in menopause or this transition doesn't have to be. It's the stereotype that we see. I talk to a lot of women who are on the other side. They're so happy. They're like, it's so great on this side. But if you are lacking joy, there's so many things that we can do. It doesn't have to be that way. I mean, I have plenty of friends who are, it's the best years of their lives, and they're in the middle of perimenopause. So we can biohack our way through this. And I just want to remind you, if you are struggling with it, please get in touch with me and we'll fix it. So we bring
Yes.
vitamin J.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah, no. And I mean, and I think that's one of the things that I love, like podcasts like yours and just so many wonderful advocates for women going through this time of their life, that like this does not have to mean, the doom and gloom that like society has always made it out to be. I mean, we have so much opportunity, women who maybe their children are going away to college, right? Like this is an opportunity to focus on yourself, like choose a new career or find a new hobby. Change is hard, of course, but I think there's just, a mindset shift to this that we can have, and really we have so much life to live, and this is the time to start focusing on like how can you really optimize your health so you can feel wonderful and vital and energetic in this next kind of half of our lives.
Yes. What about MitoPure supporting muscle health, let's say? How does taking something like MitoPure compare to essential amino acids, creatine, or any other supplements that support your muscle health?
Yeah, well, I think, a perfect supplement combination would be MitoPure with creatine and with, whether it's essential amino acids, if you can tolerate whey, some sort of protein and amino acid supplement. And, the reason is MitoPure works in this very unique pathway of mitophagy, right? And but that's not the be all and end all, right? Like just like we talked about diet, just like we talked about exercise, there are other things that you can do that are going to support muscle. And we know the benefits, especially in women, of taking, I recommend about 5 grams of protein daily and some sort of, depending on, your workout and what you do, some sort of protein, not necessarily for everybody, but again, most of the women I work with are struggling to get adequate protein in. When we start to find out that we need, you know, potentially 100 grams or more of protein a day, that becomes really challenging. And so whether it's essential amino acids, a whey protein, a nice plant blend, if you are plant-based, I think that's like the perfect muscle support for women going through perimenopause, that little cocktail right there.
Mm. On it. I hope you girls wrote this down and get on it today. Let's transition into the serum by timeline. I know you're not a dermatologist, but let's talk about the urolithin A inside a serum. I never heard of urolithin A skincare, and first of all, like why did we even, or you or timeline or whoever responsible that even go into that, and how would it work for improving our skin in midlife? And I got the bottle
Well,
right here, and I just started it.
oh,
And
I can't wait to hear your reaction to how it's going. So let's first just remind, and I know I'm a little bit repetitive here, but the key to urolithin A is on the mitochondria, right? And other than our red blood cells, every cell in our body has mitochondria, and it relies on energy from our mitochondria to do our job. So whether it's a muscle cell, whether it's a brain or immune cell, which is actually where research is going on mitochondria, that we can kind of chat about that later, or whether it's a skin cell, right? They all are relying on energy from your mitochondria. And as the mitochondria decline, less energy means those cells aren't doing as good of a job. And so what that means in a skin cell, less collagen production, less resilience to the damaging effects of the sun. So I think of urolithin A, while a total different mechanism of action, right? Vitamin C. We know you need to eat it. It works internally, but you get a localized type of benefit when you apply it directly to your skin. And so I wasn't part of the research team, kind of the product development of skin, but from what I understand is we were hearing people, we didn't study it on skin, right? We really studied it on muscle, but people were saying like, I'm noticing my skin looks better. And so we started looking like, do the skin cells absorb urolithin A? And it turned out that yes, they do. And we did incredible research. So supplements are sort of the wild, wild west in terms of like labeling and testing. And it turns out that skin is even more wild than the Wild West in terms of how brands are making claims and studying skin. And so we've done like the same rigor and quality testing on our skin products that we did on our dietary supplements. And so what we see, and same thing like I mentioned on the dietary supplements, we did one of our skin studies was specifically just on postmenopausal women, and that was looking at wrinkle depth and wrinkle volume, I believe. And what we found in using the MitoPure topically in our skin line is in just 2 weeks, people were noticing significant, like they were noticing visible improvements in fine lines and wrinkles. And then when we took that out to 8 weeks and we measured this with, very high-tech imaging, those improvements were statistically significant.
Mm.
The other thing that we noticed, we did skin biopsies, and we noticed that the genes that are responsible for collagen assembly and organization, they're upregulated. And for women going through perimenopause, we know, right, just like estrogen impacts our muscles and impacts our brain, it impacts our skin cells. And we see this, like there's somebody that I like, I can't remember her name. Like I follow her on Instagram and she's an esthetician in like midlife. And she calls it like the skin dump or something like that, where you just sort of like wake up one day and it's like everything feels loose and hanging. And that is really that like sudden drop in estrogen that we start to have and the role of collagen, right? Our skin gets thinner, it's more likely to bruise. There's so much changes that happen to our skin as we go through this transition. And so the fact that urolithin A can help basically turn on collagen production, to me, that's kind of getting at the root cause of what, well, the root cause is probably estrogen, but it's getting at sort of that issue there, right? The cellular energy that's happening there. And the other thing about the skin product, two things I think that are really, really nice and unique to it is we also tested skin exposed to UV damage, so the damaging effects of the sun, and we know that that's actually the number one thing that causes our skin to age is sun damage. And I know there's a lot of conversation around the benefits or not of sunblock. And urolithin A is not a sunblock. Let me make that very clear, and nor should you use it in replacement of a sunblock. But it makes the skin more resilient to the damaging effects of the sun. So it seems to help protect the skin from photo damage. So that I think is really a unique thing. And it's so gentle and it's not irritating. So like something like retinol or even like, alpha hydroxy acids, a lot of these things that we're using in our skin lines, they can be really harsh and irritating on the skin, whether you have sensitive skin or not. And in our clinical studies, and then even post-market with, lots of people using it, we're not seeing any of that sensitivity that's happening. So it is really nice for people who struggle to use some of these more harsher, I hate the word anti-aging, but
Yeah, I know,
pro-aging,
but
healthy aging skin ingredients. This is a really nice alternative to that.
I love that I can read the bottle and I understand the ingredients, right?
Yes.
It's pretty amazing. And Urolithin A was listed as number 6. It wasn't like the last one on the list, which means that it has a teeny tiny bit of Urolithin A. So there must be a healthy dosage in here.
There's 1%. So there's 3 skin products. There is a day cream, a serum, and a night cream. All 3 of them have 1% urolithin A, which is what we found is like the dose that really got the most efficacious changes.
Really, because it sounds like a little, like 1%, but I guess
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
enough.
and it's more than enough. Yeah, that is definitely what is the dose that's in there. And then based on what the other, whether it's the day cream or the serum, because we wanted to make it, if somebody chooses, it could be a full line and you wouldn't necessarily need anything else, right? So there are some antioxidants in there. There is niacinamide, there's some peptides. The night cream has like nopal flower extract, which is kind of like a natural alpha hydroxy. So there are other active ingredients, but the studies that we did were specifically just on urolithin A. And then we have done some studies that are on the entire skin line as well. But we know the urolithin A is really like that key ingredient. It's doing that cellular turnover of the mitochondria, and that's really helping our skin cells act in a more youthful way.
Okay. And I like the fact that there's no fragrance either.
No
It's really
fragrance,
clean.
no dyes. So our company is based in
Switzerland,
Switzerland.
not
Yeah.
far from me.
Yeah. So we really put that Swiss quality into everything that we do. And some of your audience might be familiar with, it's called Yuka, which like in the US, I think people are a
Yes.
lot more familiar with Skin Deep, the environmental working group. But Yuka is a similar type of tool that you can use to assess the cleanliness of your products.
An
And I think
app,
we
by
have,
the way. I'll put
yep,
it in the links in the show notes.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's an app and it'll give a rating from 0 to 100, 100 being the cleanest, and zero probably being don't come even like in the same room as that product. But we have, gosh, now I'm forgetting if it's 91 or 93, but it's over
Okay.
90 Yuka score. So
Oh, that's
very, very
good.
clean product. Yeah. And again, the skin is, I believe, clean label certified as well.
Amazing. I'm super excited to see my results. I wish I could get a hold of those machines that you guys had where you could see like a damage, like
Well,
deep. I mean, I'll see what I see, which is pretty important, but there's probably stuff that you don't see with your eyes is not enough, and it'll prove the reversal of some damage, I'm sure.
for sure. And my thought on it as a dietitian, like the science of the supplement, like even if I didn't feel the benefit, I know what's happening on a cellular level, right? Like I don't feel my vitamin D working, right? But I know that when I got measured, my vitamin D was on the lower side. Like, I'm getting into winter in New York, like I'm going to take vitamin D, right? I know I'm going to supplement that. I don't care what the science said. If my skin did not look good after using this product, like I wouldn't use it. And
Mhm.
I have actually, I obviously work for the company, so we have to take this with a grain of salt, but I wouldn't be here saying this if this wasn't true. I've stopped using so many other skin things that I didn't think were working. Like I had all my lotions and potions and, hyaluronic acid and some peptide and this and that. And I have simplified my skin routine. I use R3 products. I do use a vitamin C. I do use a prescription Retin A, 1 or 2 nights a week, and that is it. And
Mm.
I don't think my skin has looked better. So, you know, but again, right? If my skin didn't look good, I wouldn't be
Yeah.
using it.
Well, yeah, exactly. And it looks fabulous. So whatever
Thank
you're doing
you.
is working.
Thank you.
So is Urolithin A the next big thing for women in menopause?
I personally think so. And I think it's honestly the next big thing for anyone who is just thinking about how they age, men, women. The research where it's going is, I mean, I think we've just scratched the surface here. So there is so much preclinical data. So that means like in animals, not necessarily in humans, right? It's in animals, it's in, cell cultures showing things from cognition. We do have actually, this is a human study, which I'm really hoping will be published in the next couple of months, looking at it in immune aging. So our immune system as we get older, partly due to mitochondrial dysfunction, gets fatigued. And that's part of not just why we get more sick as we get older, but even the development of age-related cancers. And so what we saw was really robust, beautiful, almost like a remodeling of the immune system. So I think there's so much potential. And over the course of the next couple of years, almost like an omega-3, right? Like we're just learning more and more and more about it can help with brain health, heart health. I think that's where the research on urolithin A is going to go. But as a perimenopausal woman and someone who is really concerned with brain energy, muscle energy, and my skin, I am really becoming very convinced that this is, up there with creatine and up there with, with adequate protein. Like this is probably one of those things to add to your just everyday wellness stack.
It makes sense. Mitochondrial function is one of the hallmarks of aging, right? So we got to, I think this whole mitophagy thing is really important and we'll definitely revisit as we age. Everyone can find more information about Timeline and Mitopure on the website, which is timeline.com. There's Instagram and Facebook. I'll have links to that, even YouTube channels. Is there a place where we can find you, Jennifer, if we want to know more about you and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Jen Scheinman Nutrition, and my website is Next Gen Health, Jen as in Jen. And so people can find me there. And then, yes, all of our research is open public domain. So you can find that all. If you're somebody who really likes to research and dive into the research, you can find that on Timeline as well.
Excellent. So everyone can also get 10% off their first order of MitoPure and the serum or any other products on timeline.com/Zora. So before I let you go, and I love that you are a woman in this perimenopause stage, do you have any last words for a woman going through the menopause transition?
I think, similar to what I said earlier about just sort of my Lyme journey, I think, we need to find a practitioner who is willing to listen and not dismiss our symptoms. I hear so many of my friends are bringing things up to their doctors who are kind of dismissing it. And, if you have the luxury of your insurance plan to find a new doctor, I think we just need to be vocal about what we're going through and not just, have a doctor prescribe us an SSRI or dismiss our symptoms. So I say be vocal, share what you're going through, listen, and find somebody who can kind of comes at you with empathy and support and is willing to work with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jennifer. And I hope we get to have you on again.
Me too. I would love that.
Have a great day.